This is graphing quadratics number 2. So what we're going to do today is we're going to find the vertex point of our parabola using the vertex formula x equals opposite of b over 2a. So this is exactly what we did last time. We're just going to do a redo, and I'm going to go into a little greater detail in our 3 tools that we have for graphing. So graphing calculator, Desmos, and then the fallback, which would be relying on our algebra skills. So this is going to be a redo of our first lesson together, and that's it. So no new information presented here. We're just going to practice again. So in order to find the vertex point, remember that we are always looking at quadratics in standard form. Ax squared plus bx plus c, where a is always the coefficient of the quadratic term, and b is always the coefficient of the linear term, and then c is always the constant. So when we find the vertex point, we either have a smile or a frown. The smile happens when we have a positive a value, and the frown happens when we have a negative a value. So we get a minimum point from a smile because the vertex is going to be at the very, very bottom of our smile. And we get a maximum point from a frown because our vertex point ends up being at the very tippy top of our parabola. Okie dokie. So what I'm going to do first is I am going to find vertex points using the graphing calculator. So I have given you some directions here on using your graphing calculator. If you are at home and you do not have a graphing calculator right now, remember that you can always use Desmos. So a couple of things that I want to point out to you. You know how to put things into Y1. You know how to graph. Sometimes your parabola is in a very strange place on your graph. And in that case, you can hit zoom 6. So let me show you what zoom 6 is. Zoom 6 is standard, which will take you back to a standard window, which goes from -10 to +10, and in the Y direction, -10 to +10. You can also, if you go down a little bit farther, zoom 0 is zoom fit. So it will automatically, so let me put this other option to you here, zoom 0, that will automatically shift your graph around, find your graph, and give you the best window as far as the graph is, or I'm sorry, as far as the calculator is concerned, but it will give you the best fit for your graph. So zoom 6 is zoom standard, and then it'll give you the 10 by 10 viewing window that we have. Okie dokie. So remember what you have on your calculator. You have your trace button, which you can punch in your own X value. And you have a table of values that you can look at on your graph. So those are the 2 tools that I use most frequently on my graphing calculator. All right, so is it a max or a min, number 1? So think about it. I am looking right here. A negative means that this is going to be a frown, which means that the vertex is going to be here on the top. So because it is a frown, that means that we have a maximum value. All right, let's find the vertex point. So how do I do that? I use x equals opposite of b over 2a. So that's going to be the opposite of a -2 over 2 times a -1. That's going to be 2 over a negative 2, which is negative 1. So I have a vertex point at negative 1 comma something. So if I'm using my graphing calculator to do this, I'm punching my equation into y equals, so negative x squared minus 2x minus 5. And then I can either graph it or I can go to my table of values. So if I'm on the graph, I can hit trace, x is negative 1, and that tells me that I'm at negative 1 comma negative 4. Or I can go to my table of values instead, look at an x value of negative 1, which gives me a y value of negative 4. So negative 1, negative 4 is my vertex. And my axis of symmetry is x equals negative 1. All right, let's take a look at number 2. So number 2, I'm looking at this positive value right there for A. Positive means that this is going to smile, which means that the vertex is going to be down here on the bottom. So a smile tells me that it's on the bottom, so this is going to be a minimum value. And now we find our vertex point. So x equals the opposite of b, negative 16, over 2 times 1. That's negative 16 divided by 2, which is negative 8. So the vertex point is going to be at negative 8 comma something. That actually tells me that my axis of symmetry is at x equals negative 8. I'm going to highlight that to make that stand out a little bit. That's that invisible line, remember, the axis of symmetry. All right, and then I'm going to punch this into my calculator, and I've got an x squared plus 16x plus 71. Now, I already expect that when I graph this, I'm not going to be, oh, I guess I can see it a little bit. My values were so big, I thought it was going to be out of my window for sure. But I can go to my table of values, and I can look at a negative 8, and that should be negative 8 comma positive 7. That is your vertex point. Number 3, and remember, you can pause this video and you can work this out ahead of me and then unpause and watch it and correct your math as you go. All right, so positive A value right here is going to mean a smile, and a smile puts the vertex at the bottom, so this is going to be a minimum value. All right, so now we do our vertex. X equals opposite of 36 over 2 times 2. So that's going to be a negative 36 over 4, and negative 36 divided by 4 is a negative 9. So my vertex is going to be at negative 9 comma something, and now I know that my axis of symmetry is at x equals negative 9. That would be a vertical line right down the center of our parabola. All right. So I'm looking at these big values, thinking what I was thinking last time, that I'm not going to be able to see this graph. So 2x squared plus 36x plus 170. We'll graph it, and oh, there it is, just a little teeny tiny little bit there. I want to show you zoom 0. There we go, zoom 0. That is zoom fit, and it'll take you to what the calculator considers a better view. Now, I don't know about you, but that does not look like a better view to me. So you having control over your window sometimes is a lot better than your calculator having control over your window. So if I go back to zoom 6, remember that is the standard view, negative 10 to positive 10, negative 10 to positive 10. It doesn't matter. I can still look at my table of values, and I'm going to an x value of negative 9, which is negative 9 comma 8. So the vertex is located at -9, +8. All right, number 4. So number 4, I'm looking at this negative value right here. A negative value means that we are going to have a frown. And if we have a frown, vertex is going to be right here at the top of the graph, making it a maximum value. All right, vertex point. So vertex is going to be at x equals opposite of -6, which is +6, over 2 times a -1. So that's going to be 6 divided by -2, which is a -3. Vertex is going to be at -3 comma something, and then that tells me that my axis of symmetry is the line x equals -3. All right, here I go on my calculator. So I'm doing -x² minus 6x plus 5. Instead of using table of values, I'm just going to go back and I'm going to use the trace button. And that may or may not work. I'm not confident. I can't see my vertex, but I'm wondering if I can still trace my value. So trace and then punch in -3, and I can see that is at a +14. If you're still unsure about that, you can always double check yourself and go to your table of values, -3 comma +14. All right, so that is your graphing calculator, again, if you have one. If not, your other really great tool is by using Desmos. So I will remind you once again, you want to use the NC test version of Desmos. So when you do your Google search for it, you're going to type in Desmos NC test, and then you can pick the testing version. If I'm recalling correctly, see this bar here? I think that the Desmos, just the regular version, is a blue toolbar here, and for the NC test version, it is green. Okay. Also, a couple reminders on Desmos. When you want to type in an exponent, you can do hold down Shift and hit 6, and that is the caret button. Your number 6 has the caret on top of it. So Shift 6 will raise you up into the exponent. Or if you prefer, let me go here to Desmos, you've got like a little keyboard icon. I'm going to just draw the little icon here. It's got the space bar, and then it's got all of the little buttons on it. Or you can click that keyboard icon, and then you have a whole bunch of things that pop up. So if you needed a square root, or if you needed pi for some reason, that's your squared button. If you need to put in an exponent that is bigger, you can do a to the b power. So check it out, x. And then if I do a to the b power, it just raises it up so that you can type in your own exponent. Usually I'm quicker if I'm just doing Shift 6 instead of playing around with this little keyboard and using my mouse to do that. But you need to find what works best for you. Okay, so here I go. Same exact process. This negative means a frown, and a frown means the top. So this is going to be a maximum point. And then I'm going to head over to my Desmos screen, and I'm going to punch in y equals -5 x, Shift 6, square it, arrow out, -2x minus 6. So you can zoom in or you can zoom out, whatever you need to do. So -5x² minus 2x minus 6. Okay, so my vertex is going to be right there at the top, and that is not a very pretty vertex, but it is a vertex nonetheless. So vertex is going to be located at -0.2 comma -5.8. And that tells me that the axis of symmetry is going to be at x equals negative 0.2. And that is a maximum value. All right, number 2. So I'm looking here at this positive A value. Positive is a smile. Vertex is on the bottom, so that is a minimum value. Coming here to Desmos, I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to make that a minus 8x, and then that is going to be a minus 40. So I'm just going to click and drag. Actually, I'm going to zoom it out because we are way down here. Okay, so clicking on my vertex, that tells me I have a nice looking vertex at 4, negative 56. And the axis of symmetry would be the equation x equals 4. Number 3, you have an option here. Okay, well, let's do max or min first. Okay, so that is a positive A value. Positive is a smile, and that means that my vertex is on the bottom, so this is going to be a minimum. When we do our fractions in Desmos, so if I look down here, I think if I go to functions, miscellaneous, maybe not. Maybe we just put in the fraction. Let's see what happens. So I should have a y equals, and then I'm going to do 1 divided. Oh, look at that one. As soon as I hit the divided by, it dropped me into a stacked fraction. So that's really nice. So 1 divided by 2, so that gives me 1/2 x squared. This needs to be changed to a plus 3 divided by, see, it stacked my fraction again, 4x. And then I need to change this to a minus 5. And I can't see my graph, so I'm going to go over here and I'm going to zoom and scroll and drag, and here we go. That is a good picture of my vertex, and vertex is located right there. So negative 0.75, negative 5.281. Axis of symmetry would be located at x equals negative 0.75. Number 4, I am looking here at the negative. Negative means frown. Frown means vertex is up here at the top, so that is a maximum. And then I'm just going to get rid of this fraction, make that a negative x squared. I'm going to get rid of this fraction and make that a positive 3x, and then a minus 15. So vertex is right there at 1.5, negative 12.75. Axis of symmetry located at x equals 1.5. So I think that you would probably agree with me in using Desmos. Once you get your equation in, and then you can just edit as you go, becomes a little bit quicker than using your graphing calculator. And I think that you'll find as you learn more and more about Desmos and your graphing calculator that Desmos is better and faster at some things that you need to do, and your calculator is better and faster at other things that you need to do in this course. So part of being a good mathematician is knowing what the best tool for the job is, and then using that tool. All right, so the last thing that I'm going to do today is show you how to find the vertex algebraically. So algebraically, I mean using algebra, plugging in your numbers and chugging. So step number 1, find the x coordinate by using the vertex formula. We already know x equals opposite of b over 2a. And then we are going to find the y coordinate by plugging in your value for x into your function. So that part is on the calculator using either trace or your table of values. That would be your calculator doing that for you. Here for Desmos, it's as easy as just clicking on the vertex point. So algebra is always a little bit slower, but I'm going to use my calculator to actually make it a little bit faster. Okay, so if I'm not using Desmos here, I'm just using my equation. I need to find opposite of b over 2a. So that's negative 10 over positive 10, which is going to give me negative 1. So my vertex is going to be at negative 1 comma something. To use algebra, all you're going to do is you're going to take that negative 1 and you're going to plug it in for x. So you would type in 5 and then negative 1 square it plus 10 times a negative 1 plus 2. And if I keep going at it by hand, a negative 1 squared is 1 times 5 is 5. 10 times a negative 1 is a negative 10 plus 2. So then 5 minus 10 is negative 5, and negative 5 plus 2, that is a negative 3. So that tells me that my y value has to be negative 3. So using algebra to figure out what that y value is. Some of you right now are thinking, who in the heck wants to do that? I totally agree with you. But what if you are taking like your state test and something happens and your calculator goes out? I mean, you can raise your hand and you can ask for another calculator. Maybe your batteries are dead at home. Maybe your internet is out and you still have your work to do. Algebra is the foundation for everything. It's important that you can use it. We're just very, very blessed that we have some technology tools to help us make that process a little bit easier. All right, so x equals opposite of b over 2 times a. So that's going to be negative 10 over negative 8, which would be negative, actually a negative over a negative is positive, so 5/4. Ugh. So you're either plugging in a fraction and you're going at it, or if you don't have a calculator and you're doing this by hand, then you have to long divide that out and get 1.25. So you can already see that a decimal, it is not going to be very, very user friendly for us to do this and plug in a 1.25 and to do all that multiplication by hand, or if you're plugging in a fraction, to do that fraction work by hand. So that tells you that it is time for one of our technology tools to make this easier and faster. So back in the day, you would have had to number crunch all of those things out by hand, but we are much, much more fortunate now. So x is 1.25 comma y is 8.25. That is your vertex. All right, number 3. I've got opposite of b over 2 times a. That's 2 over a negative 2, which is negative 1. So this one is actually not bad to plug in. Multiplying things by a negative 1 is relatively easy. So negative 1 squared is positive 1, but then I have to do the opposite of that, so negative 1. Negative 2 times negative 1 is a positive 2, and then plus 5. So 5 plus 2 is 7, and 7 get rid of 1 is 6. So some problems, I'm actually faster by hand than I am by going to the computer and putting it in on Desmos or typing it into my calculator. So for me, this problem, my best tool to use is just my brain and just to do algebra. Let's see, last one, number 4. So opposite of b over 2 times a, that's going to be 8 over 6, which is 4/5. thirds. 4 thirds is 1.33333333. So you do not want a decimal on that. If you plug in a rounded decimal, you're going to get an even more rounded answer. So you do not want to do that. You want to plug in 4 thirds, square it, minus 8 times 4 thirds, and then plus 3. So I'm going to use my calculator to do that. 3 and then 4 thirds, square it, minus 8, and then 4 thirds plus 3. That's awful. I'm going to go math, and I'm going to change that back into a fraction. So my final vertex answer is 4 thirds, comma, negative 7 thirds. So that's it. Desmos gives you a bunch of decimals. Your calculator has the ability to change your decimal back into fractions. So again, knowing the appropriate tool will make your math easier as you go forward.